I'm back again, of course, with Larry Klayman. Larry, it's wonderful to have you on the program, as always. We've got an interesting bunch of topics to discuss today. You're looking very dapper. How are you, Larry?
Thank you, Jason. And you're looking very chic and casual.
Yeah, casual. I'm just at home today, working from home as always, Larry. I want to start the show off by saying thousands of people watch the videos that you and I do, and I want to encourage those people to go to freedomwatchusa.org. It's a lot of difficult work that you and your team there are doing, traveling around, filing briefs, appearing in court, doing all kinds of things, fighting for justice and the rights of people who are being persecuted by a corrupt DOJ. So I really do want people to go over to freedomwatchusa.org and support Larry and his colleagues. I also, of course, want people to support Crowdsource the Truth by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth or subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. Larry, you've been doing a lot of filings. Now that the Bundys are back in jeopardy, we've got prosecutors in Nevada who, despite the case being dismissed with prejudice for prosecutorial misconduct, they're digging in. What's the latest with the Bundys?
Just to go back a little bit, Jason, as we know that over a year ago, the supersedious indictment of the Bundys and other defendants was dismissed by Judge Gloria Navarro, a judge that really had no love lost for the Bundys, but she ultimately did the right thing because the prosecutors in the case of the U.S. Attorney's Office were caught hiding exculpatory evidence, lying to the court, and threatening a whistleblower, Larry Wooten, who came forward with evidence that there was a kill list on the heads of the Bundys, to name just a few facts. Well, over the course of the last year, the U.S. Attorney, who's trying to protect people inside the office, has asked for 3 extensions of time to file appellate briefs. They took an appeal within 30 days of the dismissal of the supersedious indictment, but they never followed through with appellate briefs. They kept saying they're evaluating. In the third attempt to get an extension, I strongly opposed it on behalf of Klayman Bundy, saying, this is not the reason that you can continue to take extensions of time. Criminal defendants have speedy trial rights and other rights that are related to the Constitution, not to let things hang over their head. And I pointed out that the only reason for this appeal was to protect the prosecutors who are in jeopardy of not just being demoted and fired from the Department of Justice for the misconduct, but also losing their law licenses. Now, what we did was, months ago, we had started investigations inside of the Department of Justice with the Office of Professional Responsibility and the Inspector General. They worked together to do an internal review of this gross prosecutorial misconduct. And for that reason, although the prosecutors ultimately filed appellate briefs, the Ninth Circuit, this is the appellate court, never granted them the third extension to file it. It's now been 47 days since they requested it, almost 7 weeks. And I think that the Ninth Circuit is looking to throw out the entire appeal, potentially. So today, I filed a supplement to my motion to strike these appellate briefs as untimely, and I pointed out how the Department of Justice is conducting this internal investigation. And I also pointed out, and this is really important, that the Solicitor General, that's the arm of the Justice Department. I'm an alumnus of the Justice Department, former trial lawyer, prosecutor, defense lawyer. He never signed the briefs. The only parties that signed the brief as lawyers was the U.S. Attorney itself. And we know that the prosecutor who furthered this case, primarily the lead prosecutor, was a guy named Stephen Myray, who's been sanctioned before for prosecutorial misconduct. It looks like the U.S. Attorney, in a renegade action, filed these briefs without the authority of the main Justice Department through the Solicitor General, who's in charge of appellate proceedings, to proceed with this appeal. And this is what I filed today on behalf of Klayman Bundy. And we're hopeful that the Ninth Circuit will just simply throw the whole appeal out. Because, see, the risk here is that if this dismissal of the indictment is reversed, Klayman Bundy, his sons, and the other defendants, those who didn't plead out, will be back in front of a jury and could potentially get convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment. That's the stakes.
Wow.
And that's why we ask for your support. Go to ClyvanBundyDefenseFund.org, because there's a limit to things. Klayman was kept in prison along with his sons Ryan, Ammon, Mel, and Davey for 2 years. Klayman was thrown in solitary confinement initially by Judge Navarro. He was denied his speedy trial rights along with the other defendants. He was denied his right of counsel, which was me. I participated behind the scenes in that matter. I'm representing them up front in other cases. But this was an absolute outrage, and to keep this hanging over the head of the Bundys is not just unjust, but it's a gross abuse of the powers of the Department of Justice. And I hope that the Ninth Circuit will do the right thing and not allow, after the fact, for this U.S. Attorney's Office to file appellate briefs and simply dismiss these appeals. That's what I was attempting to do before, and I attempted to do that today.
Larry, why would they be facing life in prison? I mean, it seems like that's something that would be reserved for murderers and terrorists. It's just absolutely unfathomable.
Well, it is unfathomable, but if you add up all the different counts that they were charged with, it would amount to life imprisonment.
Wow.
And Klayman, who's now in his mid-70s, even a shorter sentence would in effect do that. And this is the finest family I've ever represented. They're good people. They're the salt of the earth. They're furthering the American way of life by ranching the land. Hundreds of ranchers have been driven out of business by the federal government. We have lawsuits proceeding with regard to having the land declared owned by the people of Clark County in Nevada. We have counter lawsuits for gross prosecutorial misconduct on behalf of Ryan Bundy that I brought. So we're working on a number of fronts to try to get justice here, but it seems to never end, and there has to be an end to everything, including gross prosecutorial misconduct by these very corrupt and compromised prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah. It's interesting, Larry. You know, it's just over a year since you and I met right outside the Bundy hearing, and, you know, it was viewers of Crowdsource the Truth who had implored me to go there and learn more about the Bundy's story. I really hadn't been following it before that, so I'm really thankful that people urged me to do that and that I got to meet you there at the trial. I think we've been doing a good job of getting the word out, and this is really important. It's just one of the most outstanding examples of prosecutorial misconduct and, you know, withholding evidence and all this stuff that everybody should be very concerned about.
That's right, Jason. Today it's the Bundys. Tomorrow it could be you and your loved ones.
Right.
And that's what we're going through today. So we need to make Bundy's last stand, this case, to set an example that the federal government cannot do this through what has become a department of injustice on a number of fronts, and not just with regard to the Bundys, but with regard to others, whether it's Schaefer Cox, who I represent, or whether it's regard to the president himself, who's being persecuted by this Justice Department. It just never seems to end, but is getting much worse daily, day by day.
Yeah. Now, of course, you're also challenging Robert Mueller through your lawsuit on behalf of Dr. Corsi. How do you feel the challenge that you and the doctor have posed to Robert Mueller has impacted the ongoing special counsel investigation, or has it?
What we did, Jason, as I've said before, is that we're asserting rights directly. We're not sending out tweets, press releases, and other things, you know, going on TV, on Fox News or other cable news channels, pounding our chest, you know, professing innocence. What we're doing is professing innocence in actions for Dr. Corsi. And we did file a criminal complaint against Robert Mueller and his staff. We did file a $350 million civil lawsuit for various acts, unconstitutional acts. And this, I believe, has created respect with the special counsel's office. They know that we can't be rolled. Now, Dr. Corsi has said that if he's called to testify in the prosecution of Roger Stone, he's never said anything negative about Roger Stone. Roger Stone has defamed him along with surrogates, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But if he's called to testify, he will testify truthfully. And that's why Dr. Corsi has not been indicted, and that's why Roger Stone was indicted. And Roger Stone was also indicted for allegedly threatening to kill a material witness, person number 2 in his indictment. Dr. Corsi's person number 1 That person's name is Randy Credico. Stone threatened Credico if he didn't testify the way Stone wanted him to testify before congressional committees and perhaps grand juries, that he would be killed along with his service dog. That's what Stone was indicted for. Now, Dr. Corsi hasn't done any of those things. He did not participate in that. And that explains why when the indictment came down against Stone, Dr. Corsi was not accused of any wrongdoing. But I've said to the president, I said, look, you've got to take this on frontally. Your lawyers simply go on Fox News and other outlets. You have certain legal rights that you can be asserting just like Dr. Corsi, and you should do so before it's too late, because the president is being dragged to the guillotine. And just this week we're going to see, we'll talk about it later, his lawyer, Michael Cohen, with that very sleazy lawyer, Lanny Davis, who I've opposed in the past, who I sued when I was running Judicial Watch, he's coming forth to, again, perjure himself, this time in front of the House of Representatives at the same time that the president's trying to negotiate peace and a denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula in Hanoi, Vietnam. This is treason on behalf of the Democrats. They're trying to divert attention away from the president's good efforts to create peace. They're trying to humiliate him and harm him as he's doing the work of the American people in the world. And it shows you where we are today in this country and why you need a Larry Klayman. You know, I'm the only lawyer that I know of, and I'm not just scratching my back, Jason, who will stand up to these things, who will risk all, along with my clients. And Dr. Corsi's done the same thing. He turned down a plea agreement, a sweetheart plea deal offered by the special counsel Mueller and his staff that would have required him to lie under oath and testify against the president. And he said, no, I'm not taking the sweetheart plea agreement. He could have done no time. He says, I will not lie in front of my creator. I will not lie under oath in a court of law.
I mean, this basically seems like the game plan of Robert Mueller to just get everybody into some kind of difficult situation, sort of force them to bow to his stupid plea deals. Just back on Michael Cohen for a second, Larry, isn't he accused of lying to Congress already? Why would they bring him back to testify if he's a known liar?
Well, because Gerald Nadler of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, a very leftist, sleazy Democrat, and not all Democrats are sleazy, by the way, and I'm nonpartisan. I've sued Republicans as well as Democrats, including George W. Bush, for illegal surveillance and other actions. But they are trying to destroy the president, and they're trying to harm his efforts to negotiate peace with North Korea, because that would, in fact, ensure President Trump's reelection in 2020 and get President Trump a Nobel Peace Prize, I might add, one that he deserves, unlike Barack Obama, who got one for doing virtually nothing. This is the game. That's the game that's being played, and it's a very dangerous game that is harming the people of the United States.
Yeah, I saw some dopes on Twitter mocking President Trump's proposed Nobel Peace Prize, but certainly if you were living in Japan and in fear of nuclear missiles hitting from North Korea, and then President Trump came in, people will remember that Shinzo Abe was one of the very first, I think he was the first world leader who Donald Trump befriended, and Japan is a major trading partner with the United States and important for keeping stability over there in the Pacific region. So I would think that the people of Japan are very excited by the prospect that no more nuclear missiles will be coming from North Korea, and that would be the type of thing that you would expect someone to be nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for.
That's right. And it's ridiculous to hear Democrats and these pundits on the cable news network say, well, if the president doesn't get any this time, it's a total failure and he should never go back. When is it that the Democrats and the left have a problem with communist regimes? Bernie Sanders took his honeymoon in Moscow. They're now moving so far to the left, it's borderline communism that they want in this country. They want reparations paid for things that happened 200 years ago so they can pander to minority voters. So it's totally disingenuous. And, the fact that all of a sudden, this Russian boogeyman or the North Korean boogeyman or whatever bothers the Democrats and the left, that's just so they can do a number on our president. And Jason, I'll tell you something. We are, in effect, President Trump's legal defense firm at Freedom Watch, and me personally, because he really doesn't have lawyers who are standing up to anybody these days. They're basically going with the flow. And, you can't let things happen in today's world. You have to make things happen in your favor. The best defense is a good offense.
Yeah. And I hope that people will go and contribute to some of these cases that you are defending over there at freedomwatchusa.org. So many of them are so important. Schaefer Cox, the Bundys, Dr. Corsi, Sheriff Arpaio. These are very important cases. So, Larry, do we want to talk about some of the, I don't know how to describe them, the surrogates, the outside forces, people who have been sort of stirring the bucket?
Let me do a segue here, Jason.
Sure.
Okay. Is that the difference between Dr. Corsi and Roger Stone is that Dr. Corsi told the truth. The difference between Dr. Corsi and Roger Stone is that Dr. Corsi hasn't threatened material witnesses to testify in a particular way. In fact, it was Dr. Corsi who said, I'm not going to testify falsely. But people should not be confused that Roger Stone, who bills himself as the preeminent dirty trickster of all times, who is now indicted, who actually did a Netflix documentary where he bragged about these things, where he likes to equate himself to mafia figures. And I've heard it because I knew Roger and I haven't talked to him for 15 years. And that's a long story. His heroes are Hyman Roth, a.k.a. Meyer Lansky, and Roy Cohn. Okay? You should not equate the two. So what Roger Stone has been doing, and in fact his recent gambit was to threaten the judge, Amy Berman Jackson, by putting up on his Instagram site the judge's picture with the crosshairs with a gun, which could potentially incite violence against this judge.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Larry, because this image with Amy Berman Jackson with this crosshairs here, is this a photo composite created by Roger Stone? Because it sort of looks like she's just standing in front of an image with this symbol. Obviously, I
don't know where it came from, Jason, and frankly, I don't care because you shouldn't post that wherever you got it. And last week when there was a hearing, and apparently Stone was asked to explain it, he blamed someone else for it. And the judge made reference to the fact that she's hearing the testimony, but every few minutes or so, Roger Stone is contradicting himself. Anyway, to make the long story short, Stone was gagged and he was threatened with having his bail revoked and incarcerated if he threatens people continuing into the future. And what Stone has done is to use surrogates to do his dirty work. And, I'm just saying it like it is because there's misinformation out here. People feel sorry for him because 29 FBI agents came in and raided his house. Well, you know what? I don't know whether I feel sorry for him or not, given what I know. But the reality is this, is that he's using a surrogate recently by the name of Pete Santilli. Pete Santilli was one of the defendants that was indicted along with the Bundys. He's a radio talk show host in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he pled out right before the Bundys case went to trial. And in pleading out, he agreed with the prosecutors, these corrupt prosecutors that I was talking about, that the Bundys had engaged in a conspiracy along with him to obstruct justice and impede law enforcement. In effect, he himself indicted the Bundys in crimes. Now, if this case ever goes back to trial, is that the prosecutors will most likely put Santilli on the stand and ask him about his having admitted in his own words that the Bundys committed a crime, which they didn't. And if he says that he didn't mean that, they'll just simply pull out the plea agreement and impeach him with it. Now, I want to show you this plea agreement because it shows you who Pete Santilli really is, because he's out defaming me and Dr. Corsi as we speak. And he's doing it on behalf of Roger Stone.
And, I mean, just touching on that Roger Stone photo for a moment, irrespective of the content of the image, it's a pretty stupid idea to make Instagram posts about a judge presiding over your criminal case, isn't it?
Well, it's not only stupid, but it shows that Roger Stone's out of control and can't control himself, but it's part of a pattern which lends credence to the indictment that he threatened the life of Randy Credico and his dog. And we know that he's engaged in these kinds of acts against Dr. Corsi and I. And now he's using Santilli to do his bidding for him. Now, let's look at this plea agreement.
Number 2 here?
Yes, well, in the agreement, yes, that the defendant became a member of the conspiracy, knowing of at least one of its objects and intending to help accomplish it. Now, who was that conspiracy with? The Bundys. So he's admitting to that, Pete Santilli. Then it says facts supporting guilty plea. The defendant will plead guilty because he is, in fact, if you can go back up again, and under the law, guilty of the crimes charged. The defendant acknowledges that if he is elected to go to trial instead of pleading guilty, the United States could prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant further acknowledges that his admissions and declarations of fact and set forth below satisfy every element of the charged offense. The defendant waives any potential future claim that the facts he admitted in this plea agreement were insufficient to satisfy the elements of the charged offense. The defendant admits and declares under penalty of perjury that the facts set forth below are true and correct. This is sworn to under oath. Now let's go down to number 2. This is what truly shows who Pete Santilli is. Defendant Santilli knew that Klayman Bundy and his sons, Ammon, Dave, Mel, and Ryan, collectively the Bundys and others associated with them, planned to thwart, impede, and interfere with impoundment operations. Okay, those are crimes. That was what was pled in the indictment that was ultimately dismissed, the supersedious indictment. So Santilli is implicating Klayman Bundy and his sons in crimes, and that would certainly be used against Klayman and his sons if this matter ever went to trial again. So let's go fast forward right now again. And the only reason, Jason, that I'm raising this publicly is because Pete Santilli, on behalf of Roger Stone and himself, has been defaming me and Dr. Corsi repeatedly every single day. And it's now out there. I didn't wish to have any of this publicized, but now that it's out there, I have to deal with it, and I have to explain to the American people exactly what's going on. Right. So what did Santilli do? And we allege in a complaint that I have filed against Pete Santilli that he did so in concert with Roger Stone. He filed a totally false bar complaint against me in the District of Columbia, which in effect claimed that I represented him. I never represented him. Claimed that I provided information to Jeff Sessions, which was confidential. That's false. Claimed all kinds of other things which are totally false. And rather than, in a bona fide, legitimate way, allowing the D.C. Bar Disciplinary Council to investigate, which would clearly result in a dismissal, he then publicizes this on the Pete Santilli Show website, on his YouTube, and on his Facebook. And to make matters even worse, he even interviews Roger Stone in one of these defamatory publications. So here's an important fact. Pete Santilli is currently on probation, 2 years of probation, having pled guilty to felonies. His probation officer, I therefore advised of this, because the probation supervision agreement says you're not to cavort around with people who've committed crimes and suggest that you're not even to have anything to do with people who have been indicted for crimes. Yet Santilli is cavorting around with Stone and doing his bidding. And as I allege in the complaint which I filed, the likely reason for this is that Santilli, who had no radio show when he was in prison, is trying to rejuvenate it and to raise money by, in fact, bringing Roger Stone in, who was, very much in the news these days. And what's also interesting is that back in 2017, Santilli's assistant co-host on his show, and apparently his girlfriend, it's been reported, Deb
Jordan,
invited Stone to Las Vegas, Nevada, to speak with regard to the Bundy prosecution. I, at that time, warned the Bundys to stay away from Stone. I said, no, this guy's bad news. You don't want to deal with him, and they did. But this is what's happened. Now, to try to cover his derriere, to put it in French, okay, to say it nicely,
right.
When I advised the probation officer of what was going on, Santilli asks his lawyer, Chris Rasmussen. See, I'm not his lawyer. Okay, I never was. I had no obligation to do anything by or on behalf of Santilli. he asked his lawyer to go to Judge Navarro seeking permission that he can interview Stone. Of course, he had already interviewed Stone. He had already been working with Stone. But this was to cover his derriere. And sure enough, particularly after the probation officer, Thomas Barbeau, had submitted a probation report to Judge Navarro summarily denied a motion for Santilli to interview Stone because that would be inappropriate and improper and perhaps even illegal under the probation agreement.
Huh.
So this is the story of this person, Santilli, is that not only did he try to throw the Bundys under the bus to try to save his own skin, but now he's out there working with Stone to harm Dr. Corsi and me as part of Stone's ongoing intimidation, coercion, and threatening tactics to get witnesses to not testify against him, such as Dr. Corsi. So lawsuits have been filed, not just against Santilli, but against Roger Stone by Dr. Corsi and I. And this needs to be addressed because you cannot allow this to happen in a civilized society, and it's out of control. And Stone, frankly, by working with Santilli, has likely already violated the gag order which Judge Amy Berman Jackson issued just last week.
Yeah. I was quite surprised by all of this, Larry, because, you know, I had recently met Pete Santilli and sort of considered him a friend, certainly a colleague. We had done a few shows together. I'm really surprised that he would poke the bear, as it were. And, I mean, what did he expect? The thing that really upset me was that I heard that show, and he said something about the Bundys having fired you or something like that, and I knew that wasn't true because I communicate with you all the time. I speak with Ryan Bundy every now and then, and I knew that you were going to see Klayman Bundy at his ranch. So I was like, wait a minute. For a long time, people have told me, don't have Pete Santilli on your show. Pete Santilli is this, Pete Santilli is that. But I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, and he always seemed to have some kind of response for whatever it was that people said. But when he said that, and I knew it wasn't true, and he put in that bar complaint against you, I was really pretty shocked. Larry, we've got a piece of world-exclusive video here. Should I play this for everybody?
Well, yeah, what happened is, and this shows that he's not honest and that, frankly, he lies, is that when the process server went out to serve him, he denies to the process server that he's Pete Santilli and shuts the door. Well, he has been served. He's admitted that because he continues to defame me. And in fact, just last week he did a show where he went through the complaint sounding like the Joker in Batman, just gaggling and laughing, you know, in a bizarre way, and admitted that he was served with the complaint. Now he's publicizing the complaint that I filed against him. You know, I didn't publicize it. I just wanted to have it litigated in a court of law. But now I have to defend myself, Jason, you know, and my clients, Dr. Corsi and the Bundys. And therefore I have to go public and explain what's been going on because every day there's a new article that he's generating with Roger Stone.
There's a lot of these dopes on social media who like to, you know, have this crossover between like high school level taunting and actual legal action, but it seems that the two are incompatible. Let's play this video and everybody can, you know, sort of decide for themselves. People should pay particularly close attention to the sound of the voice of the person who answers the door and the program that he's listening to in the background as well.
We report, you decide.
Hi. Thanks, Peter.
Who are you?
Vicky. I am a delivery person. I'll please documents for you.
You're with who?
The courts.
No, I'm not.
You're not?
No.
Is he living here?
What's that?
Does he live here?
I don't know if I should tell you.
Jason, he denies that he's Pete Santilli.
Yeah, he says
so
he's not Pete
your
Santilli.
Show, I won't deny that I'm Larry Klayman. How's that? Okay.
You look just like him.
Yeah, this is the merit of the individual who, frankly, you know, doesn't tell the truth. And, you know, it's sad because what he's trying to do is make himself relevant again. He's trying to boost his listeners. He even in his last show was raising money off of the complaint that I filed. and people were donated to him during that episode. It's about money, Jason. That's what it's about. And for Stone, it's about intimidating witnesses and money, because he also has a legal defense fund. But don't be fooled. You know, you said, and you're a really good person, Jason, and we become true friends. Okay, yes. We talk almost every day. Is that that's a term of art? Okay, and Santilli was never your friend. He was never anybody's friend. He's only his own friend, and he proved that with the Bundys when he pled out on the eve of trial and incriminated them in committing crimes that they never committed. And that is the most despicable act, frankly, I've seen in my 42 years of legal practice.
I agree with you, Larry. And, you know, just to satisfy my own curiosity, because so many people had told me this, I've asked Ryan in private and other people associated with the whole Bundy Ranch issue.
Yeah, please don't repeat what Ryan said to you.
Okay.
If you'll not do that.
I will not do that.
Yeah.
But this all led, people are going to say, oh, Jason's throwing Pete Santilli under the bus. Not true. I gave Pete Santilli
the only reason I say that is I
opportunity.
represent Ryan, too, in the lawsuit. And I don't want to bring the Bundys into this. This is my fight.
Good point.
It's not theirs.
People might recall when I went to New Zealand, I met with Vinny Eastwood, who was a longtime enemy online of Pete Santilli, and I gave Vinny a fair opportunity to share his case. Pete was adamant he wanted to be on Skype. He wanted to taunt the guy during the call, became very aggressive in contacting me. I didn't want to subject Vinny to that, so people can go back and watch that Vinny Eastwood call. Larry, something I've also noticed is that there's a technique that's emerged online where there's this sort of distribution of torts that I believe these people are doing this to try to avoid a RICO operation. I was reading a lot about the Harvey Weinstein case, and they failed to demonstrate that the people working for Harvey Weinstein were engaged in RICO because there weren't enough individuals who are doing the same thing consistently to demonstrate that it was a de facto organization. And I believe that the people that are supporting these types of efforts against you and I are doing something similar. There's this blog that is bolstering Santilli's posts by writing about them, and this is anything but an unbiased blog. It seems to be very negative towards you, towards anyone that appears on Crowdsource the Truth, very negative towards me, but it thinks that Robert David Steele is a genius and David Swigert, anything that they do is great. What do you think about this assumption on my part about the avoidance of RICO?
Well, something needs to be looked at, Jason. You know, RICO is a conspiracy that takes place over 10 years, with two or more acts, which is designed to reap profit for the violator of that statute. There's civil RICO, there's criminal RICO, and it can be used in appropriate circumstances. And yes, I mean, I believe that I may have to amend my complaint with Santilli to include RICO if this thing continues. And you certainly have your causes of action against these individuals that are trying to destroy you. And it's all too easy to try to do it on the internet.
Yeah.
And, you know, these people think they're big shots, okay? But they're not big shots, because when they're called before a court of law and a jury, they're no longer big shots. And the only way that you can deal with this, you do it peacefully and legally, you do it in court, and Mr. Santilli is going to be appearing in front of a jury in the District of Columbia, which is not going to be, in all likelihood, very friendly towards him. And therefore, this will come out in the wash. But you know what? These people are not smart enough to know to stop. They become infatuated with their own sense of what they view as their power to destroy people. And the only way that you can deal with it, whoever it is, whether it's Pete Santilli, Robert Mueller, whether it's, you know, people inside the Justice Department, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Nevada, you have to fight back, and you cannot be afraid. And this is why I admire the president so much, is because, you know, they're beating the living crap out of him.
Yeah.
And this week with Michael Cohen, let's talk about that right now.
Yeah.
They're teeing it up to impeach the president within the next few weeks and to have him tried in the Senate. And you have these very vicious people whether it's Adam Schiff, and we have an investigation of Adam Schiff and his finances. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. Gerald Nadler, the head of the House Government Oversight and Reform Committee, or others like Maxine Waters, like Pelosi herself, out to destroy the president using our taxpayer dollars to destroy the president as he's trying to negotiate peace in Hanoi, Vietnam, with Kim Jong-un. This is treasonous. And this does not excuse what other people have done who have been indicted. And there are people who have been indicted who have been justly indicted, not for the crimes that the president is alleged to have committed, but for their own crimes, alleged crimes. So, but there's a duality in our justice system where anybody in and around the president's indicted, but anybody dealing with the Clintons, Comey, and others like them walk away scot-free. And here's the other tragedy, and I've talked about it before, is that people in the conservative media, particularly at Fox News and some other places, they're self-congratulatory. They circle the wagons. They're very happy they've got these big consulting contracts with Fox News or big host contracts with Fox News and otherwise. And it just becomes entertainment. They're not taking any real action to defend the president or to urge him to himself take action. And, you've got something coming up in a few weeks at CPAC, Conservative Political Action Committee, where a lot of these people just gather around to beat their own chest and congratulate themselves as to how great they are. And in fact, CPAC and the American Conservative Union actually opposed Trump. They were never Trumpers, but all of a sudden they became his great friend, when he was elected. But there's a large portion of the conservative movement that's only out for themselves and not out for results. That's true in any movement. I'm a proud conservative, and I'm in part libertarian, I might add. But you have to call a spade, and that's why what I'm doing and Freedom Watch is doing and what you're doing, Jason, and what Laura Loomer is doing and others like her are so important, because you're risking everything to get a result. These people are risking everything, in large part, to stuff money into their pockets. And you see that time in and time out. And this stuff goes on in the internet. No one calls them on it. No one takes them to task. And it goes on and on and on because it boosts ratings on all these cable networks.
Yeah. Larry, I was just in Times Square earlier, and it appears, well, actually, I was alerted to this, but are you familiar with the broadcast Red State Radio? And Tori says she had this ad up on the billboard here above Ripley's Believe It or Not, where she's taken out a digital billboard there to support Laura Loomer and Milo Yiannopoulos and Gavin McInnes, all the people whose freedom of speech has been taken from them by some of these social media giants. And of course, tomorrow James O'Keefe's Project Veritas is going to be releasing a big expose on Facebook and some of the abuses that the largest social media network has been doing. Without these independent voices in media, we would all be listening to just Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, these billionaire-owned, multi-million-dollar, advertiser-sponsored news outlets, if we can call them that basically are just pushing whatever agenda Robert Mueller and the mainstream establishment wants to be pushed.
That's right. And that's why you're showing my website at Freedom Watch. We now have 30,410 names who've signed a petition to have me named special counsel. And we need a special counsel like Larry Klayman that will do it no holds barred, no pun intended, with our current Attorney General, because
right.
He will have holds barred. Okay?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of Freudian in my trend of thought here. But, we do have our case, our class action against Facebook, against Instagram, against Twitter, against YouTube and Google. And we have filed briefs in that regard. You can see them at freedomwatchusa.org. And just today, the social media companies, who predictably banded together to defend themselves, filed a reply to our opposition to their motion to dismiss. So we're going up against Goliaths here, and we need your help. And this case will probably wind up at the Supreme Court as well, because what we alleged in the complaint was that these social media companies run by ultra-leftists who hate Trump, who loved Hillary Clinton, who loved Bernie Sanders, who loved the rest of them, that they colluded, they restrained trade by discriminating against conservatives. So we can't communicate and educate the American people. Because, as I've said before, Jason, it was the printing press leading to our revolution, which began on July 4th, 1776, which mobilized the colonies, that coalesced the colonies. And we need our modern-day printing press, social media and other ways of communicating with the American people to save this country from its radical move left. Because today what we're seeing is a coalition of the radical left, whether it's the radical Jewish left. I'm a Jew, so I don't mean that in an anti-Semitic way, but I'm embarrassed and appalled by the radical Jewish left, who's also trying to destroy the state of Israel, I might add, and is a threat to the Jewish people. The radical gay, lesbian, and transgender community, the radical atheists, the radical socialist communists, the radical African Americans, and the radical pro-illegal immigrant groups. They're all banding together, and I might add the Muslims. Okay,
they're marrying their brothers and stuff.
Yeah, they're all going together in a coalition to take down this country. It's right out of Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. Now we have reparations. Everybody's supposed to be the same. Soon we'll all be called the same name. Maybe Zeke or Glenda. I don't know. That's what happened after the French Revolution. And then there was a counter-revolution. And they're serious. And if they can't accomplish what they're doing at the ballot box, they'll do it violently. And they've already shown that through Antifa, Black Lives Matter, people that support Louis Farrakhan, Al Sharpton, their disciples have killed people in the streets. And we're headed for a real violent revolution unless this thing is turned around. And the way that we can help do that, notwithstanding lawsuits that I file and civil and citizens grand juries and that kind of thing, is to educate the American people. And we're being deprived of that because these social media companies who comprise a monopoly, who have agreed to restrain trade, are keeping us from communicating in a big way with the American people.
Yeah, and I've had a lot of interviews with Larry Nichols, and he was speaking about this push for reparations before I really heard anybody else do it. I can't help but think that this exposed hoax of Jussie Smollett coming forward and, Jussie Smollett getting basically called out by the Chicago police, I can't help but think that may have been intended to help push that type of legislation. I mean, we've heard Cory Booker call for lynching to be made illegal. I mean, isn't it already illegal? Isn't it murdering somebody?
Hey, Jason, as a Jew, and, you and Laura and others, I want my piece of the pie, too. Hey, we were slaves in ancient Egypt. Maybe we can get reparations for that. I mean, we built the pyramids, right? And it's, a little humor to make the point here. Why would even consider reparations to things that have gone on hundreds of years ago to people who had nothing to do?
Well, where do you end it? I mean, you're making a joke, but it's a fair point. What about Native Americans? I mean, it just seemed like an odd thing to come up. And before we get off of William Barr, because I know, we would like to see you appointed as special counsel, I was looking at this article from 1992 today, back when William Barr was Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. And this is talking about how Barr angrily dismissed the demands of Democrats they wanted him to get a special prosecutor to investigate the Bush administration's aid to Iraq before the Persian Gulf War. And he resisted this. There never was a special counsel to investigate that, because probably what they would have found is any chemical weapons or weapons of mass destruction that were in Iraq were put there by the United States.
Well, yeah, who gave all this to Saddam Hussein? None other than George W. Bush, Donald Rumsfeld, and Dick Cheney. Vice.
William Barr was there running interference when it came time to talk about it.
They gave him anthrax, which later was used on us after 9/11. They gave him chemical weapons. and they looked the other way as he was developing nuclear weapons. And rather focusing on Iran, and allowing Saddam Hussein to do the job on Iran, they destroyed. Bush ultimately took Saddam Hussein out. Ironically, it probably would have been good if we allowed Iran and Iraq to continue to fight forever. At least it would have kept them occupied.
Yeah. Now, there's another method that's being used, Larry, along the lines of what you were saying about silencing people in social media, independent voices that are the only opportunity, the only hope we have for honesty. And I think this started long ago. People might recall this individual, Robert David Steele, appeared on InfoWars with Alex Jones. And he told Alex that NASA had a colony of slave children on Mars. Now, he's tried to deny that he said this, but he said it. And then it immediately got attributed to Alex Jones and was used to smear Alex Jones. So I see a pattern where these false stories are put out, or some sort of stupid piece of information is put out. It gets attributed to someone, and in this case, Alex Jones. It gets beaten down. And we can see what's happened to Alex Jones and InfoWars since this occurred. And I see it as one element in a pattern intended to take out InfoWars, because InfoWars was frankly it was an important factor in Donald Trump winning the election.
Well, I'll tell you something. Look, I liked Alex, and I liked people around him like Owen. I was on the show frequently. But they had Stone on there. Stone became a host, okay? And I was defamed on InfoWars, and so was Dr. Corsi. So, I have a different opinion today. And I might add, I was informed by the lawyer of InfoWars that Stone has been let go by InfoWars, and that's a very wise decision by InfoWars. Okay, So we'll see if that's the case or not. But, you don't want these people around you. They're going to get you in trouble in the long run. And so hopefully Alex and Owen and company over there, have learned a lesson. And this is one other example of don't associate with certain types of people, because the odor will start to rub off.
I hope they're able to recover, because I appreciate what they've done at InfoWars. And I think there's a lot of people, Larry, who want to insert themselves into operations like InfoWars and Crowdsource the Truth, only to emerge later as enemies. It's happened many times to me. So before everybody goes out there and says I've thrown Pete Santilli under the bus, I gave Pete Santilli a lot of opportunities, and I won't even share the personal text messages that he sent me when he put out that broadcast. He basically warned me not to get involved. And it's like, don't tell me what to do or who to have on my show. Larry is my friend, frequent contributor to the show, patriot. He's defending all these people.
He actually threatened me through you at the time. And, here's the thing, Jason, is that people shouldn't be so upset about Pete Santilli. I mean, he's a third-rate talk show host who very few people listen to, but he's out now working with Stone to try to destroy Corsi and me. I wish that it never happened, but I've got to address it.
Yep.
And like I say with the president, you have to fight back when people try to harm you and your family and people around you.
Yeah.
And it's regrettable that it happened. I could use my time in a much better way, fighting on behalf of President Trump and the American people.
Yeah, and I think that's a big component of what these guys want to do, is basically just waste time. I do appreciate you spending your time with us, Larry. We've got some more time right now. What else would you like to speak about? Anything else happening there at freedomwatchusa.org?
Well, the last show that we did got a lot of viewers, Jason. It's going up. Of course, we'd get more if the social media companies didn't discriminate against us.
Yeah.
But Laura Loomer's revelation that Representative Ilhan Omar was cavorting around with a sign saying vote twice has caught a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And of course, we've submitted a deportation petition to the Immigration and Naturalization Service for immigration fraud, since she married her brother to get her brother's citizenship. It was widely reported. But it's being picked up all over the place right now, and I saw that others have picked up on it as well, such as Pam Geller, who's fought radical Islam in this country. As Laura says, it's Islam. There are good Muslims in this country. I have several as friends who renounce Islam. But if you are practicing Islam, as it is preached in the Quran by Muhammad, it's not really a religion, in my opinion. It's a political cult. And any so-called religion which advocates killing infidels, which means you and me, in my view, is not a religion. And that's what we have to face. Now we've got this infiltrating Congress with these radical people, and some of them are attractive, some of them speak well, and it's as if the devil has found his way into Congress, and we have to address that. So I hope people will go to freedomwatchusa.org, read our petition. It's not an attack on good Muslim people. It's an attack on people who are trying to promote the Sharia law and Islamic creed in this country, to take this country over and to persecute Christians and Jews and destroy the state of Israel, our ally.
Yeah. And people can hear your radio broadcasts, of course, by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Where else can people hear the radio broadcast, Larry?
They can go to radioamerica.com, and they can hear it live every Sunday. Well, it's taped, but they can hear it every Sunday in about 35 stations throughout the United States. It's growing quickly, and hopefully it'll come to your hometown soon. But we're in some major markets. I mean, we're in Washington, D.C., we're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, we're in Seattle, we're in Las Vegas, we're in the Chicago area, and it's growing. And, I let it rip. I tell it like it is. The lead into the show says that we don't just report the news, we make the news. And then at the end, a little tongue-in-cheek, I say, I'm the son of meat packers. I know how to slice and dice, and we're going to take the country apart and put it back together in the vision of our founding fathers. And you've been on it a lot, Jason. And I might add, every time you're on it, I get so many compliments about you, because you're so articulate and you're so smart, and you're such a great interviewer and activist, that you're going to become widely successful without a doubt. And you already are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that. And I also have to thank the generous sponsors on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We're almost out of time for today, but Larry, when can people expect to see this hearing in Washington, D.C. with Mr. Santilli?
Well, I don't know that there'll be hearings. I'm not inviting people to publicize it. Okay, Santilli did that. So, I haven't published the complaint. He sent it out there on the internet. You can find it. But, I want to do this in a dignified way. I'm not doing it for publicity. I'm doing it for justice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he will go to trial at some point in the future, and I'm sure that he'll try to raise money off of that, as he did by reading the complaint the other day, laughing like a wild man and accusing me of lying when, in fact, he was lying. And, that's his shtick. It's not mine.
Yeah,
he'll answer to a jury of his peers.
There's a lot of people who seem to think that it's all fun and games publicizing these civil actions on the internet, but of course, you're a lawyer. You've dedicated your life to this, and you need to jealously defend the interests of your client, in this case, Dr. Corsi. I don't know what Pete Santilli expected. I mean, you go poking a bear, and it is not going to work out well. It's sort of like, punching Mike Tyson in the stomach. What do you expect him to do?
It's like drowning men, okay? They grab onto something. Desperate people do desperate things. Santilli, basically has little to no listeners on his radio show, so he figured by aligning with Roger Stone, he could boost his viewership and listenership and raise money. And now that he's been sued, he's using that to raise money for a so-called legal defense fund. So it's a game. And Santilli will answer to a court of law. And, frankly, Jason, Santilli is not somebody I want to spend my time dealing with unless I have to.
I understand. Well, Larry, I appreciate you joining me on the show here, and I think everyone is pleased to see that video so that everybody knows exactly what's going on instead of all this he said, she said. We'll have you back on again soon. It's getting a little late here in New York, so I want to remind people to visit freedomwatchusa.org. Larry truly is the hardest working man in the law business, and he's there defending the rights that the Justice department seems to enjoy abusing. I hope that people will go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate generously. It's a nonprofit, so these are going to be tax-deductible donations. And if people donate over $250, Larry's going to send you a 4-volume series of the books that he's written. So it's a great way to get those books and to read all about Larry's time in the Department of, the Department of Injustice as it is now, and that's why he left there, of course. I also want to invite people to go and visit patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Lots of exclusive content on there. Just did a great show with Michael Moore of True Pundit, exploring the relationship between El Chapo and the DEA and the long-standing bizarre entanglement of the U.S. government and the various drug cartels south of the border. Larry, thanks very much for joining me tonight.
Thanks,
I really
Jason.
do appreciate you taking the time. It's always great having you on the show. I'll see you soon.
God bless. Thanks.
Thank you. And thanks for watching, everybody.